So we're just going to look at 3 things that have extremely strong support in research. And the first one is that we know for sure that body language influences perception. And the way in which this happens is that you need to think about your posture and what it communicates to people. So standing upright with your shoulders back, chin up, and making eye contact, moving in a slow, controlled way, this suggests that you are calm, you're relaxed, you're approachable. You know the difference it makes when you're at work, for example, having a meeting, and somebody has very nervous or agitated energy. It doesn't feel as good to be around them. They don't feel as in control. You don't look to them so much as a leader, as if they project the kind of leadership that we were saying a moment ago comes through this sense of being under control. If he can control himself, he can control other people well. We don't want to follow someone who seems like he's in his own way. It's a really core principle. Now, eye contact as well is very important because it actually makes people feel seen. You don't want to do this in an aggressive way, staring someone down like a predator, but when you're making a point, eye contact can help to underscore it. And also when you are listening, eye contact can help to actually make the other person feel that you're being attentive. Now, people have said that there are various percentages that are optimum. I'm not sure that that's something to worry about so much. The main thing is when you are speaking to someone, make sure that the majority of the time you're making eye contact, not the whole time, and the same thing for listening as well. Now, seems obvious, right? But many people will actually spend more time looking at their phones, even out on dates with their wives, than actually being attentive to the wife in front of them. They'll be pulling out the phone, checking notifications, scrolling for work emails. And what does this communicate? That you're not actually present, you're not attentive, you're not cherishing being in the moment. Now, you might find that to begin with, actually having your phone in a different room is what you need to do to be able to break out of those habits. Now, when we say that body language influences perception, we don't just mean how other people perceive you. It's also about how you perceive yourself. Super interesting point. There have been studies showing that the way you stand and speak and move actually changes your own hormone levels. So you can increase your own testosterone or decrease your own cortisol, for example, just through being more mindful of the way that you actually stand and interact and breathe. So you are actually learning to see yourself as a leader, move like a leader, speak like a leader. And when you start to see yourself that way, then your wife is going to follow. Now, the next point that's got really strong grounding in research is the importance of mirroring. And this might sound complicated, but actually it's not. It's just another way to forge connection. So what do we mean by this? Well, when you're interacting with your wife or anybody really, what you want to do is try to build rapport. Same thing as building connection. And part of this is actually about mimicking her gestures. A lot of guys don't like the sound of this because they think, well, mimicking her, that sounds like following her. Not really. We go into more detail on this in the deep dive on this content in the Patriarchy Project tomorrow. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that on patriarchy.com, start there. But basically, when you're mimicking gestures, it's about matching energy. So let's say that you notice she's really excited about something that she has found out about in a book or online or whatever, or a conversation she had with a friend, and she starts getting animated. The tone of her voice changes or the volume changes, or you notice that she starts gesticulating more or leaning into you. Now, you've got a couple of options here. You could just kill the energy, be really flat, disinterested, cold, even lean away, or your voice could go quieter. You could avoid eye contact. That is disconnection. What we mean by mirroring is just basically empathizing, noticing that she's spiked the energy a bit there and being receptive to it. So showing her that you're interested to hear more. So if she leans in, you might lean in too. Her voice becomes a bit more excited in tone. Yours might as well. Oh, really? That sounds interesting. Tell me more. Because treating your wife as your best friend basically means that what you're trying to do is show that you and her have shared interests, shared goals, and that you care about what she has to say. Remember, none of this stuff is complicated. It's all very simple, but it is hard. So you might feel that when you're tired at the end of a long day, you might not have the highest levels of interest, but just remembering this simple cue of the importance of mirroring could mean the difference between her putting out that bid for connection, wanting to talk more, and then you killing it completely and making her feel like you just want to ignore or dismiss her. Now, the reason we want to do this, noticing what her gestures might be, her tone, her volume, is basically because we want her to feel that she can trust us. She can bring things to us and we're going to be receptive. One of the main things that in the end can lead to divorce is disconnection, and the idea of the woman feeling that when she puts out a bid for connection and she wants the man to appreciate something she has to say, or at least just to make her feel heard, that he's not actually there. He might be there in the room physically, but his mind is elsewhere. He's thinking about work or whatever it might be, thinking about sports. And eventually she learns that there's no real point. It's really sad, but she learns from the fact that he doesn't mimic her, that he makes no effort to actually reciprocate. There's no rapport there. She learns that actually this is a marriage that's about disconnection and she's not cherished. We'll come back to this point later. Now, the third thing we're going to cover in a moment, but I just want to make sure that if you're interested in what we've been covering so far, and we're through 2 of the 3 main points, if you're interested and want to know a bit more about how we can apply these very simple but powerful principles to some of the practical problems that you might be facing in your own marriage, head to the link here, because in tomorrow's deep dive, I'll be hearing more from how you feel things are going in your own home life, some of the practical situations you might have been confronted with, where now you're thinking, yes, I can see how those 2 body language keys that we covered today so far might apply and help me, but I'm not exactly sure how I should handle things. I'll be asking you more questions about that, and then we can look at what some of the best responses to it would be. It's really for people who don't just want to know the principles, but how to actually implement them. Get the steps on the practical how-to. Now, the third thing I think is super important, especially when you combine it with the other 2 keys, because what we're looking at is basically ways to reduce defensiveness, reduce tension and conflict. And if you have not just tall and confident, expansive body language, which is also something that can make you feel and be seen as powerful amongst other men, dominant, if you also have open body language too, so actually creating a kind of safe space physically for her to feel that she's able to actually get close to you and relax with you, that also makes a big difference. You might have noticed that if things are getting tense and an argument is starting, for example, you might take a step away. You might close off. You might fold your arms. You might even turn side on, and it starts looking like a kind of fighting stance. Now, obviously, that's not the kind of dynamic you want to encourage with your wife. So keeping that idea of being expansive, being receptive, so that she sees you are welcoming even before you open your mouth is really important. So be mindful of the way that you sit. Start looking at couples when you're out in cafes or restaurants. See who you think has good energy, who's getting on well. Notice some of these body language cues and just train yourself to get out any bad habits that you might have. When you see closed off body language, you're also tending to see disconnection or the beginnings of it creep in. For example, the guy has his arms crossed, face glued to his phone. The woman also has her arms crossed, maybe turning away from the table, not even looking at him. You know what that body language suggests: cold and isolated. Now, the other point about having open body language is, apart from inviting her to approach you, it also suggests your own comfort and confidence in yourself too. So you come across as more of an authority figure because you are able to hold court, if you like. So you want her to approach you because you're interested to see what she has to say, and you're comfortable fielding those questions, having those interactions. People who are closed off are basically saying, leave me alone. And that's a way of communicating nervousness. Now, I was interested just to try and get some extreme examples of this. So before we get into some questions from you guys about stuff you might have noticed about practical applications of this, I wrote some different descriptions of a guy doing this really well, these 3 points, and doing it really poorly, and fed them into an AI image generator just for fun to see what will come out. And here we have the two kind of extreme examples. So on the left there, we have a smiling man who's standing relatively upright, and he's come through the door after work, greeted his wife. She feels good in his presence. And the point here is what we're seeing is connection. He's happy to see her, and also vice versa. He doesn't need to say that with words. It's clear just from the energy that he brings into the home as he returns from work. So she feels welcomed and appreciated, and he's not slumping his shoulders. He's not sighing with exasperation. He's not suggesting that he's broken by his day's work and has nothing left to give her. He's the kind of guy who, when he walks into the room after a long day's work, realizes that actually his true work has just begun. And you have to remember that. Flip that mental switch. What kind of energy are you bringing to the household? Because you're the provider in that sense too. It's not just about providing money. It's also about providing the emotional energy. And what we're talking about here is ways to actually get that to register in your home, apart from just the words you use and how you say them. Now, the guy on the right is doing everything wrong. He's grim, he's sullen. You can see from his eyes and his crossed arms as well that he's not interested in interactions. Now, if that kind of person walks through the door after work and then his wife is looking at him, is he inviting? No. What kind of attitude is he projecting? Leave me alone. And also, I'm not interested in you. So these are all ways of communicating. Could be depression. It could be that he actually wants disconnection from her. He's repelled by her in some way. Now, whatever it might be, it's not going to be inspiring confidence in her, and it's also going to affect the way he sees himself too. His hormones are going to change as well as hers. That's based on some of the strongest research we have about body language. So the habits that you are building through these little decisions are always going to be impacting on your relationship at the deepest level. That's why I've just chosen to present these 3 things, because I know you'll be able to focus on them consistently and get great results from them. What we're trying to do ultimately is remember that we are trying to make wives feel cherished rather than ignored. Husbands deep down want to feel respected, and that starts with self-respect through the way that we actually carry ourselves, the way that we speak, the way we move, the way that we dress even. We'll cover that later. Wives deep down want to feel cherished. And when the Catechism of Trent says that the husband has a duty to treat his wife generously and honorably, what we mean by that, with the generosity, is actually some of the gestures that we've been talking about here today. Specifically, the emphasis on rapport, mirroring, openness, trust, and connection. Now, as you're listening, you're probably thinking, this is actually really simple. And that's true for many things in life. So if you want to build wealth, for example, you have to save and actually retain money, because wealth is what you don't spend. So you might need to increase your income, you might need to decrease your expenditure, but ultimately it's going to boil down to that. If you want to get stronger in the gym, you have to be consistent. You have to lift heavier weights over time, or the same weight for more reps. People can dance around those basic facts and trying to overcomplicate them and make them fancy, but ultimately success comes down to excelling in the basics. And someone that you recognize as a master in a particular field often doesn't have any kind of special information or secrets that you don't have. They have just mastered the basics consistently for longer than you have. You know the same thing as they know. They're just better at implementing it. We have all the information we could ever want online for free. It's just some people are acting on it. Some people are applying it efficiently and effectively, and others aren't. So what I'd like to hear from you now is any questions that you have about any practical challenges that you might have faced recently that you think some of these ideas can help you to make sense of. So drop some questions in the chat. Point number one, Brendan, if you came in late, I'll skip back for you. We were just talking about how body language influences perception, not just how other people perceive you, but also how you perceive yourself. Big point. I was saying that one of the big problems with guys who want to grow as leaders in their marriages is that when it comes down to it, they don't even see themselves that way. They are in their own way, and that's what's presenting a problem for the wives who are trying to follow them. It's difficult to follow a guy who is in his own way. Ty, good question. Talk about non-sexual physical touch. What are practical but non-obvious ways you can increase physical touch with your wife on a day-to-day basis? So I think this is actually one of the most important areas, especially for guys who are struggling with intimacy. What you want to do is normalize this gentle, non-sexual touch. And if you do that well, actually her libido is going to increase. The problem is that many guys do it pressurizing for sex, and that is actually a big turnoff for the woman. So simple things like just gently resting your hand on hers if you're both sitting at a table having a coffee, or holding her hand while you cross a road, or putting your hand on her waist while you go through doorways, or while she's sitting down at a table to eat. Just think of ways in which you can show that she's cherished and supported. So these kind of non-sexual, physical, intimate moments are ways of demonstrating physically that you are here in her life to support her and you're being mindful of her. You don't even need to actually touch her. It can be little things like moving objects for her. This is what chivalry emphasized with things like opening doors or giving women chairs to sit on, giving up the chair for her to sit on. So run back mentally over some of your common routine interactions with her, and you might find it's things like opening and shutting the car door for her, making her life smoother and more convenient. Hope that helps. If you need to add some more, then things like a neck and shoulder massage as well would be really helpful. But again, take your time, slow, no pressure for sex. Otherwise, it's likely to backfire. That's a great question. I know that many people need to work on that. How can we work out what we're doing wrong? It's not always obvious. Well, using the 3 things that we've covered today, you've got a checklist which is going to cover probably about 80% of what truly matters in your interactions. But one thing that some guys might find really helpful, just as like a mental reframe, imagine that there is a video camera on you when you walk in the door after work. Play it back in your mind. What kinds of things might you have noticed? So where did you go? Where did you sit? How did you sit? Did you look at her while you were speaking to her? When she was making a point to you, did you acknowledge it with your eyes, not just with your voice? And a big thing for many people is going to be put the phone away. One of the quickest ways to improve your connection is going to be put the phone away in a different room. I would actually recommend scheduling at least 90 minutes a week of just pure one-to-one conversation and connection time with your wife. That's what psychiatrists recommend as a starting point for a healthy marriage. And it's very sad, but some people don't get that. That's the minimum. Undivided attention, 90 minutes a week. And once you have that time block actually scheduled, you might start to notice that there are some things that come to the surface there, like maybe your mirroring in terms of tone, volume, interest in what she's interested in isn't what it could be. Once you have that really focused time where you're giving attention to some of your habits, you'll notice your weaknesses, and then you can start to retrain yourself in your day-to-day briefer interactions. Now, what I actually recommend is after you've spotted that you've got particular weak areas, what you want to do is actually focus on looking for opportunities to implement the opposed technique. So let's say that you tend not to ask her questions. So when she gets interested in something, you don't mirror by asking questions and showing that you're interested in her saying more. Well, the switch to flip mentally for yourself would be, When I hear her tone get more excited or impassioned, that's my cue to mirror by asking some questions in a more excited tone myself. Everyone normally is going to have one or two big weaknesses that are doing most of the damage. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that you need a really long, complicated list of top secret tricks. Most of you are going to have one, perhaps two things that are doing the majority of the damage in terms of introducing disconnection. How do I work on sharing my life with her as she doesn't feel like I share enough? That's likely going to come under the mirroring. So if she shows interest when she asks you questions, and then your response tends to be too flat or cold or distant, she's made a bid for connection with you and doesn't feel that it's actually been met with sufficient energy to actually communicate that you're interested in forging a connection with her then. Now, have you got some kind of belief in the back of your mind that you've acquired from somewhere that it's not masculine to share things? Perhaps some guys have that. If so, where did it come from? How did it get a hold on you? That's likely a false belief. And then perhaps there's something that you do want to share with her, but you're not in the habit of actually sharing things. So if you make a list, actually write it down. Stuff that you would like to share with her, but haven't. And then talk with her about that. Prioritize it and look for moments where you're able to actually build on that with her. If she says you don't share enough, ask her, well, what kinds of things would you like to know? I'm happy to talk and be open with you. And then make sure that you don't get defensive about this. Don't try to explain away the fact that you haven't shared things with her. Maybe it's because your mind's been too busy with work and you recognize it's on you. You haven't been generous enough with your conversation with her. This seems really good, but how do we give attention and time without acting like we are in her frame or simping? Well, the assumption there is that giving her attention and time is simping. And I don't agree with that, because simping is basically when a man compromises on his deepest values just for the sake of a woman. Classic example would be a guy who wants to follow God's word that sex before marriage is wrong, and he really believes that, right? That's a central belief at the core of his view of life and himself as a man. But a femme fatale, a temptress, comes along and then says, I want sex. And the guy thinks, yeah, do you know what? I'm tempted and I'm going to simp by sacrificing my core beliefs about who I am as a man and what matters just to get that thing from you that I want in the moment. So the woman then becomes a kind of idol. But we know that the Catechism of Trent, for us as Catholics, says that actually we have a duty to treat our wives generously and honorably. Now, that doesn't involve any kind of simping if you're giving her attention and time. So we can actually reject the framing of that question, because your values actually are exactly that it's important to be generous with your time and attention. Why? Because actually you want a thriving marriage, and you recognize that being one flesh, time and attention matter. So to me, it seems like you also have this false belief that you've acquired from somewhere that spending time with wives or giving them attention is a form of simping. I would actually argue it's just doing what the church says you should be doing to have a good marriage. A couple more questions. Do you think there is an order of priorities in what we need to do to be leaders? For example, you need to hit the gym first, then make more money. Is it feasible to do it all at the same time? Well, if you think about the order of charity that the Catholic Church teaches about, First, you need to get your relationship with God right. And then, because we're commanded to love our neighbor as ourselves, next thing to do is to really prioritize your own spiritual welfare. That's basically what we call frame. So make sure that you are living the right way. When you have a happy life, then you bring a wife into it, you're going to have a happy wife. So God first, man next, and then the wife comes afterwards. So that's really the order of priorities you should think about. As the man, you're not going to be able to provide and protect for your wife in the way that you need to unless you are, in a way, overflowing. And what I mean by that is that you protected yourself and also that you have energy in abundance to spare. Yes, it comes from God. We need the grace from Him to do that. But being the emotional provider, for example, for a wife, being able to be generous with your time and attention like this, it means that you have to have things in order with yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, to be able to be that kind of strong pillar for her and give her what she needs. Because the fact that women are made for men, as St. Paul tells us in scripture, means they are looking for validation and attention. A man who doesn't give them that isn't actually doing his duty as a husband. Can you hit the gym, make money, etc., do everything at the same time? Yes, of course you can. It's a balancing act. Things are going to have to be emphasized at different times, and you have to bear in mind what your priorities are. But yeah, you can do that. You might just be tired doing it. But that's okay, because men are supposed to be hard things. Men are supposed to be hard things and also do hard things. We're supposed to be hard things because life is tough and we have to be hard to actually face up to it. No pressure, no diamond. And we have to do hard things to actually become hard things. That's why scripture tells us that the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence and the violent bear it away. You actually have to focus on the things in yourself that you need to go to war on to be able to be the man that God needs you to be, that you need yourself to be, and that she needs you to be, and your kids need you to be, and why the society needs you to be as well. And that's really why we founded the Patriarchy Project, to actually help guys do this, because it's hard, especially when the world around us is trying to encourage all kinds of weakness in us, so we don't do that. When a woman says that she needs space for one reason or another, is it better to listen and obey or try to actively improve the situation with non-verbal cues? So this is one of those areas where it depends, and we get into the practical application of it in the deep dive. So we'll go into more depth on this in tomorrow's day 2 part of this masterclass. You would need to assess the context of this. Now, she might be feeling overstimulated and exhausted from a busy day with toddlers, for example. And when she says she needs space, what she means is she needs to calm down. And that's very sensible. You should say, great, I'll take the kids out. You just take 10, 15 minutes, go and have a drink, go sit outside, listen to some music. And that's the best thing for her. That's a form of generosity to offer her that. Now, you have framed this as you obeying her. And some guys feel that if a woman is making a request and then they say yes to it, then she's the leader and they are obeying. I would actually think of it more in terms of just common sense empathy. Someone is asking for help there. They're asking for your help to create the conditions for them to have space and be able to relax. And guys who feel that in whatever form, they are unable to accept any kind of influence from their wives, normally end up making a real mess of their marriages. You can look at this in the research too, on what makes marriages work and what doesn't. What the Catholic Church calls the mutual molding of husband and wife in Casti Connubii. Mutual molding is so important. You must, as a man, be able to accept influence from your wife without thinking that this means she is the leader and your sense of your own leadership or masculinity is so brittle that you can't ever compromise or see her perspective. So just a warning that in the phrasing of the question, her asking for space means you obeying her. There's probably something there that's a slight misconception. Of course, you can also try to improve the situation with non-verbal cues. So staying calm and just listening to what she has to say, often just being silent, because the silence invites her to actually expand on her point and reveal what she's actually thinking or feeling in more depth. Okay, guys, really good questions. Happy to see you attending live. Remember, this is about ultimately her feeling cherished or ignored. And if you'd like to know more about some of the principles we've talked about today and the practical applications for your specific situation, head over to patriarchy.com/start, and we'll be on Zoom together exploring this tomorrow, 5 p.m. Hope to see you there. Take care. If you found this useful, please hit subscribe, like, share it with other people that you might think would benefit as well. God bless.